reciprocates the introduction, expressing pleasure in meeting them, and reveals that he is Amnak's sales manager, Lewin Sage. Lewin hands him the mission details, asking if he can assume that Mage Van knows the context of the request since he accepted it, and the protagonist responds that he did read the description. The man informs them that Amnak is developing a tranquilizer with small-scale crowdfunding, with the idea that once the development is complete, it will sell enough to bring in profit. However, the problem is that a district representative from the headquarters used their connections with a gang to try and steal Amnak's patent rights. Lennox then ponders what he is supposed to do precisely, to which Lewin asserts that he will tell him something first. He tells him a secret that the public doesn't know, but the tranquilizer's development is already complete. He said they would send a sample to the patent office before the district representative found out, but the information was leaked. Van anxiously wonders if there's a spy, to which the man concurs, confirming suspicions of espionage, and hands him the address of the location where they relocated the samples. Lewin then tells Mage Van that he needs to retrieve the samples they hid in the storage and deliver them to the patent office without anyone finding out. Lewin feigns a fake laugh, emphasizing that he will leave it to Mage Van then. Mage Van then asks the man if he wants to give him a job. He should be honest. This directness causes Lewin to become visibly nervous and tremble as he hesitantly asks for clarification about what Van means by his statement. The protagonist suspects that Lewin might be pretending to be unaware, realizing that simply submitting the sample won't solve the underlying issue. Meanwhile, Jenny questions Lewin about the assurance that Van won't encounter the gang during the mission. Van reinforces this by asking if Amnak expects him to hide and take no further action beyond delivering the sample, expressing skepticism about this approach. It becomes evident that Lewin appears to be intentionally withholding information. The situation becomes more straightforward to Lennox, indicating that it's apparent that Amnak isn't seeking someone to run errands merely. Instead, they require a more militaristic approach. Confused by the expectation that he should solely deal with the gang while retrieving the samples, Lennox wonders if Amnak truly believes he'd comply with such a directive. He realizes that the mission demands more than retrieving samples and suggests a deeper involvement with potential confrontations. Jenny discusses with Mage Van that they should renegotiate the reward and prompts Lewin to contact Amnak's superiors about how much they can give Mr. Mage over here to motivate him to fight the gang if he encounters one. She gives him time to contact his higher-ups and takes Van back to the bar, informing Lewin that they will be downstairs. In the bar, Jenny tells Van that the company lied, but she thinks it was pretty cute as she discerns they were trying to save money. Van anxiously wonders how difficult she believes it would be. Jenny retorts that it is probably not hard as the gang is perhaps not that big if they work with a district manager. She estimates they might be 100 and are probably all on the same level as the scavengers except for the weird mixed blood leader. The protagonist then asserts that he will need more reward money, while Jenny urges him to leave it to her, assuring him that she can raise it by at least 10 million. Soon, Lewin approaches them in the bar and nods in agreement, signaling his acceptance of all their conditions. Later, Lewin drives the mage to the targeted destination, emphasizing that it's a bit late as the others are probably already there, prompting Van to ponder about others. Lewin reveals that Amnak has hired people to protect the storage, claiming there won't be as many as the gang, but they should still be helpful. In his guise as Mage Van, Lennox speculates that perhaps they hadn't intended to leave him to confront the gang alone. However, he remains uncertain about how much aid these hired protectors will offer. Lennox considers the importance of gathering information about medicine, so to obtain this, he questions Lewin about Jenny's assertion that they tried to take advantage of him despite understanding the value of his work. With trembling hands, Lewin responds, attempting to clarify that it's a misunderstanding. Lennox notices Lewin's sweaty face and, in an attempt to gather more information, asks if there are other samples in storage, perhaps something commonplace like melatonin. Lewin quickly agrees, revealing the presence of samples of other medicines, and mentions that their boss previously utilized these. After a while, they arrived at their targeted location, District 54, Amnak Storage, where some people were standing outside. Lewin informs the protagonist that they have reached their destination, noting the presence of most of the anticipated parties. Before that man exits the car, Lennox halts him, asserting that he should not leave yet. Suddenly, a person firmly knocks on the window, asking Lewin if he is from Amnak. Upon Lewin's nervous affirmation, the person emphatically pounds on the window, urging him to open the door and come out, which catches him off guard. The big guy vocally expresses dissatisfaction, stating that this differs from what they agreed on, urging what they should do with just 10 people. Lennox grasps his viper and accuses Lewin that he skimped out on them. In response, Lewin abruptly apologizes. Lennox inhales his viper, signaling for Lewin to exit the vehicle. With a resolute demeanor, the protagonist steps out of the car, contemplating that he will perform his worth of the pay. Lennox catches the attention of the people hired by Amnak, and they frustratedly yell at him, pondering who he is, and urge him to screw off as they have to discuss with Lewin. Finding their noise bothersome, Lennox calmly asks them to lower their voices, further infuriating them. The big guy asserts that Van is trapped too, as he can't even run away from the gang once they set their eyes on him. Lennox reflects that he comprehends their fear and frustration, understanding their predicament. However, he has no intention of engaging in conversation or resolving the issue amicably. The big guy abruptly lunges to assault the protagonist, but he easily sidesteps it and counterattacks by unleashing the bolt maneuver. This unexpected display shocks everyone, as they realize that Amnak has hired a mage for the task, while Lennox tells them to quiet down. He adds that it seems they know a bit about the gang, but it's a waste of time to cry about it here. Suddenly, another guy yells at him to get out of the way before he beats him up. The red-haired guy asserts that being a mage doesn't make Van better than them. The guy retaliates by employing a fire-based maneuver, claiming that while everyone might be perplexed, not all mages possess remarkable abilities. He insinuates that if Van has been recruited for this task, it's likely because he was expelled from a magic tower for having insufficient mana. This assertion resonates with the others, as they find the explanation plausible. Meanwhile, the protagonist contemplates meeting two people with supernatural skills in one day. He realizes that the guy is a flame user pyrokinetic, noting that such abilities vary widely in their manifestations and strengths, known for their potent and straightforward nature. Despite recognizing the potency of this ability, Lennox deduces that since the individual is a part of this particular group, he might not be decisive. Lennox provokes the red-haired guy to beat him and turn this car into ash, which catches Lewin off guard as he is the sole person in the vehicle. The guy denies it, asserting that a low-level mage is a burden in the first place so that he will turn him into ashes. He then unleashes his flame maneuver and ferociously lunges to assault him. Meanwhile, Lennox contemplates that nothing is resolved with words in this field of work, acknowledging that power is worth more than 1,000 words. The protagonist then deflects the fire punch maneuver of the red-haired guy with his bare hands, which takes that guy aback. Absorbing the flames, he redirects the energy and launches it back at the attacker, causing him to be engulfed in the fiery blast, and this turn of events startles everyone around. The guy burns in flame while Lennox seems calm despite being consumed by the flames. He knows that not all prokinetics resist fire, so the red-haired guy tearfully apologizes and begs for Lennox's aid, pleading to be saved. Lennox hurls him aside and contemplates that his grip lacks as he can't hold on for longer, and his comrades rush to turn off the fire to rescue him. Meanwhile, the protagonist turns to Lewin, emphasizing that the situation won't improve if he stays here, so he suggests that Lewin should leave, and the man abruptly heeds his suggestion. After that, he entered the warehouse and reflected that the pharmaceutical company had just one requirement: to bring the new sample to the patent office. Lennox resolves that he must complete the task by the morning 2 days from now and anticipates enduring another day and a half until that deadline. Retrieving the sample, he examines it and realizes he could easily abscond with it, although he acknowledges that this action contradicts Amnak's intentions. Tucking the samples into his blazer, he contemplates the possibility of a confrontation with the gang, understanding that if it comes to that, he'll need to decisively eliminate them all immediately. Later, as he steps out of the warehouse, the team members ask him about their next move. With a sigh, Lennox realizes they are unaware of the plan and asks how many of them are. The big guy responds that if he counts that redhead that just woke up, they are a total of 15 in number. Lennox commands them to split into 3 groups and patrol around the storage, instructing them to monitor the entrance closely and report to him if anything seems off. Moving around the area, he observes the chaotic state of the place and presumes that the gang never found it because of how much of a mess this place is. He notices that the walls are pretty tall and it would be hard for them to get over it, but it's pretty beaten up. He employs the Claymore maneuver, a trap magic that explodes when certain conditions are met and significantly damages those in range. However, its range is small, so it's not good for large groups, considering that Lennox changes the conditions. Instead of exploding when people are nearby, he decides to blast it when pressure is added to the wall, and in exchange for lessening the damage, he increases the range. After successfully employing the maneuver around the wall, he proceeds to secure other vulnerable areas similarly. Out of the blue, the redhead guy approaches him and humbly kneels, expressing regret for what happened earlier, claiming that he was out of his mind and assuring him that he will never speak out of line again. When Lennox remarks that there is no need to apologize, the guy anxiously ponders what he should do to earn the mage's forgiveness to let him live. Lennox realizes that the guy assumes he will kill him after this job. However, he never intended to do that, but he decides not to tell him that. In reply, the protagonist questions if the red-haired individual approached him privately because he didn't want the others to witness him seeking forgiveness. When the red-haired guy persistently continues to apologize, the protagonist eventually agrees to grant him a chance to make amends. Lennox then reveals that they will be having some guests here tonight, so the redhead needs to set fire to their shoulders like he tried to do with the mage earlier. He assures him that after completing this task, he will be excused from any further obligations, and the red-haired guy concurs. Later, inside the warehouse, while inhaling the viper, the protagonist realizes that he doesn't have many of these left and contemplates that if the gang splits up into a bunch of groups, it might be a bit too much for him to deal with. He will need to stall time with his gun if things get a bit difficult. Suddenly, he hears a commotion, which catches his attention. Before heading outside, he unleashes a mana manipulation maneuver, with which he can feel within a 2-kilometer radius. He detects that among the adversaries, 2 of them have high heat, and they are about 150 in total. Maintaining a composed demeanor, Lennox steps outside, and when a man anxiously informs him about their imminent arrival, he calmly acknowledges that he's aware. He contemplates that they can't all be mana users and speculates whether they might be arriving in cars, considering the speed of their approach. His speculation proves accurate, and soon they come to the storage. An Amnak team member urges everyone to get ready to confront them. The lights of the car's lights overwhelm their vision, and the team members nervously turn to the protagonist for guidance. Lennox notices that they are hesitating and realizes that he needs to give them some inner peace, so he commands his comrades to guard the entrance and assures them that he will take care of the rest. Observing the red-haired guy positioned at the forefront, Lennox assumes that the earlier threat has had an effect, but he wonders why the adversaries aren't doing anything. Suddenly, the rest of the adversaries attempt to barge in from the backside, catching the mercenaries off guard. However, their vehicle hits the wall back to back, prompting the protagonist to wonder if they plan to break down all the walls. He grins sarcastically, remarking that it confirms who will be making it back alive. As the monster truck hits the wall again, an explosion erupts, engulfing the vehicle in flames. It hurtles above the mercenaries and crashes onto the ground. Amid the chaos, Lennox becomes bewildered, contemplating that he did reinforce the Claymore maneuver, but it shouldn't have been powerful enough for the explosion to extend so far. However, as he observes the burning truck, he notices the fuel spilling from the vehicle and realizes that it isn't ordinary and is different. He grins sarcastically, realizing that the distinct fuel strengthened the explosion. Soon, the mercenaries notice the rest of the monster trucks, who attempt to barge in through the wall, hurdles by engulfing in flames. Meanwhile, Lennox remarks that they're paying the price for rashly attacking before figuring out their enemies. He notices two guys standing firmly and wonders if they are the ones with the high heat he detected earlier. He realizes that the long-haired guy is a mage and contemplates. This is the third time he has come across a fellow mage. The first was Professor Eris Richelin, and the second was Scavenger's detection-type mage, considering that he was rather disappointing for someone hired by a scavenger. However, he speculates that this mage is different and wonders if he is leading the gang. To get a hold of the situation, Lennox employs his elusive mana strands and finds out that 10 cars are destroyed and the number of remaining people is about 100. He then uses resonance voice magic and urges the adversaries how long they will stand there and wait, provoking them to come in, stating that he is sure they have something to discuss. While the adversaries' underlings wonder where that voice is coming from, Gile, the vice leader of the opponent's group, commands his underlings to head in. Meanwhile, the protagonist urgently instructs an Amnak mercenary to relay a message to his comrades to close their eyes and shoot once the opponents are in. In response, when the guy anxiously ponders the reason behind his directive, Lennox asserts there is no time to explain. The guy abruptly heeds his command and relays Mage Van's message that they must close their eyes while shooting the opponents as they enter the storage. The protagonist activates the Flux Light magic maneuver, which emanates radiant light, leaving the adversaries unable to see because of the brightness. Lennox's strategic move shields his fellow mercenaries, allowing them to unleash fire on the adversaries. Simultaneously, the redhead guy lunges and assaults most enemies with his flame maneuver, declaring that he will try to run away and catch them off guard. Lennox contemplates that using another spell might reveal that he is a mage, but he resolves to continue attacking anyway. He wields chain lightning to knock them down and leverages his allies' relentless barrage of bullets to gain the upper hand in the clash. His attention is then diverted to the opponent's leaders, who are standing calmly in the chaotic situation, and he realizes that he needs to deal with them. Conversely, the opponent's leader, Gile, gazes at Lennox and asks Mage Grime why he never mentioned someone like him. Grime responds that he didn't know either and assumes that Amnak can't afford that kind of mage. While they are engrossed in wondering about Amnak's mage's true identity, they are taken aback to see that amid the chaos, that guy is still smiling. Gile laughs in surprise and asks the protagonist if he has gone insane, to which Lennox ponders why they aren't worried about their dying subordinates instead. Gile laughs and retorts that he doesn't care as they are just disposable trash, stating that they can die here for all he cares, and adds that it's about time he let go of the burdens like that and flew away. The protagonist steps backward into the warehouse while the two adversary leaders trailing behind. The purple-haired mage urges his companion to stop with the nonsense. However, Giles smirks, dismissing it, and asks what's wrong with a little conversation, stating confidently that the protagonist will die anyway. His irresponsible response irritates Grime, and he asserts they must reconsider his employment if he acts like that. Meanwhile, with their conversation, Lennox realizes that the mage isn't from the gang and assumes that a leader who doesn't care about his team is on the mage side for money. Gile becomes enraged by Lennox's calm demeanor and deems him an arrogant bastard as he keeps snickering to himself like he is insane. He abruptly decides to get rid of the protagonist to find the sample, to which Grime concurs, stating there's no need to stall for time. The purple-haired mage then conjures barrier magic with his staff. However, Lennox discerns he plans to block off the escape routes. As he can't let that happen, he swiftly retrieves his gun and shatters that magic with his mana-imbued bullet. This unexpected turn of events catches that mage off guard while Gile mocks Grime, remarking that despite Lennox appearing weak, he managed to catch the mage off guard, signaling a lapse in his defenses. The purple-haired mage yells in frustration, pondering how he dares to block his magic. He scolds his fellow and asks if he doesn't know the basics of battling with a mage because he is supposed to defend him. However, Giles continues to mock him and asks if he is scared of a simple gun, sarcastically emphasizing that the protagonist hasn't even used magic yet. Giles tells the grime that the protagonist is a lightning and light mage, so he should know their magic is super conspicuous. At that moment, Lennox realizes why they are so relaxed despite being in front of him. According to him, magic that deals with light is powerful. It's very noticeable whenever one casts a spell. Most skills are very conspicuous to cast, so anyone skilled enough can prepare for it. When Lennox remains composed, Giles assumes it looks like he's going to do something but remains unfazed and threatens to rip him apart. The protagonist reflected on his conversation with Jenny when she informed him about Giles, who possesses a distinctive mixed heritage and names him unique mixed blood. Lennox ridicules Giles, noting that he hadn't recognized him in the darkness and derisively labeling him as a worthless mongrel. He then pinches his nose, claiming to detect the foul odor emanating from Giles' fur, and cynically questions whether he ever bothers to bathe. These comments deeply provoke Giles, and he instantly morphs himself into a monstrous werewolf, menacing and declaring that he will tear him apart. Lennox acknowledges that werewolves are born with wild instincts and the bodies of beasts. Their ferocity and strength are unmatched, but this werewolf is different. He notices that it can't even control the saliva dropping out of its mouth. Its claws grow curved into his flesh, and he can see knits of his skin where the hair's gone. Lennox deduces that this aberration stems from the creature being a mixed-blood werewolf. Giles issues a warning, cautioning that the protagonist should not assume a peaceful death. However, the protagonist remains unfazed and confidently remarks that it must be challenging for Giles to maintain control, noting the stutter in his speech. He commands the Giles, the werewolf, to come at him instantly as he won't be able to think for long in that kind of state. As the wolf lunges at him, it is entrapped in the Claymore maneuver, which Lennox implanted earlier. As the wolf manages to shatter a layer of that maneuver, it is instantly trapped in another layer, catching the mage off guard. At the same time, Lennox grins knowingly, a reaction anticipated since he had deployed 5 shields capable of temporarily deflecting heavy weaponry. He presumes that the adversaries had not expected his ability to block all their attacks simultaneously. Subsequently, he initiates the aim assistance maneuver and fires a mana-imbued bullet, causing injury to the wolf and forcefully propelling it aside. Having transformed into a werewolf, Giles begins trembling with fear, prompting Lennox to ponder whether he is panicking after only a single attack. He contemplates that once he starts something, he has to finish it. Considering that he can't lose the upper hand, he unleashes the Thunder Calling maneuver to overpower that wolf. Meanwhile, Mage Grime seems flustered, and Lennox contemplates that he thought the mage would intervene while fighting with the werewolf. He wonders if Grime has been casting a spell all this time and assumes that he must have prepared a good one since he has given much time. The mage raises his staff, which emanates bright light. However, Lennox discerns that it might look like a ray of light, but it's a spell that casts a strong shockwave. He realizes it's a shock-type magic that's pretty popular in World 2.0, and considers that it's not complicated at all and easy to learn, but it's intense and visibly intimidating. As it seems Grime is set to attack everything around, Lennox swiftly employs his magic, dominates Grime's mana flow, and confiscates the control. He redirects the shockwave toward the ceiling and surprises the mage by diverting the attack's direction. The mage then bursts into laughter and confidently declares that Lennox utilizes an artifact, claiming that he had known this fact from the moment he laid eyes on him. He accuses Lennox of being aligned with a pharmaceutical company and insinuates that there's no feasible way the protagonist could possess such immense power without external aid. He laughs loudly, asserting that Lennox must have obtained a powerful artifact and declares that he won't be fooled by it. He insists that Lennox must have depleted his inferior mana at this stage and asserts that it's now his turn to take charge. Amidst this, the protagonist discerns that the mage attempts to catch him off guard. He ponders whether the mage is merely deluding himself into believing that Lennox is relying on an artifact despite witnessing the protagonist's actions against Giles. Noticing telltale signs in the mage's demeanor, such as trembling pupils and beads of cold sweat on his forehead, it becomes evident that the mage is anxious. Lennox grasps that Grime is starting to doubt his initial assumption due to witnessing Lennox's capabilities firsthand, causing those doubts to linger in the back of the mage's mind. However, Grime is still uncertain, and that's why he's in a state of fear. The protagonist concludes that the person before him is an idiot who can't trust his senses and judgments. He firmly states that he no longer needs to listen to Grime and promptly unleashes the Shadow Raid maneuver. The maneuver leaves the mage bewildered as dark mana envelops him, binding his arms and legs in its powerful grip. The intense force of the dark mana is so overwhelming that it severs Grime's hand, which falls to the ground along with the staff he is holding. Overwhelmed with excruciating pain, Grime cries out loudly and collapses to his knees in agony. The mage anxiously gazes at the protagonist, and Lennox realizes that Grime is probably wondering how he can do this. He reveals that he had been preparing this skill from the moment they entered the storage. The common shadow-type magic Shadow Raid is the most discreet skill and works in the darkest depths, but it can only control the user's shadow and takes a very long time to cast. However, inside this dark storage unit, such hindrances are nullified, and it helped that Grime was so sure that Lennox was a lightning mage. Lennox contemplates that because of this, Grime didn't suspect anything. The protagonist anticipated a fierce battle, which was rather bland. He then brandishes his gun at the mage, who bursts into tears and pleads with Lennox to let him live. The protagonist covers Grime's eyes, urging him to calm down, and states that he might let him live if the mage answers his questions. Lennox questions the mage about the group accompanying him, observing that it seems Grime has brought his entire crew, and he seeks any potential connections. The mage interjects abruptly, indicating there likely aren't any more armed allies. The protagonist finds it suitable as no one will be tailing him on the way to the patent office. Grime then requests that he could be helpful in many ways if the protagonist lets him live, claiming that he is a level 3 magic user, and at that level, many people acknowledge one as a proper mage. Lennox contemplates that he isn't what Grime means, but considers that levels don't determine battles between mages. He removes his hand from that mage's eyes, prompting him to wonder if he is letting him live. Nevertheless, Lennox puts his gun on his head while the mage's eyes well up with tears and pleads for mercy. The protagonist acknowledges that he can't leave anything that could cause trouble later on, so he apologizes and shoots the mage dead. As he turns around with a heavy sigh, his attention is diverted to the werewolf, who regains consciousness and remarks that he thought he was done with him. He contemplates the potency of thunder calling and acknowledges it as the most significant force among all lightning magic. He assumes that if the werewolf were strong enough to withstand it, then it wouldn't be in this gang. Lennox discerns that the werewolf is a beast enchanted by the power of madness beneath the night sky, and the desire for that power drives that dying body. The beast regains his powers and lunges to attack the protagonist, who skillfully evades it, prompting it to stumble on the ground. Lennox marvels at the regenerative capabilities of the beast and wonders if a mixed-blooded werewolf can exercise regenerative power of this degree just because of the moonlight, then how strong would a pure-blood werewolf be? The protagonist then grasps the wolf's face barehandedly and employs the bolt maneuver to assassinate it. After that, he reflects that he just took 5 minutes to dispatch both adversaries as it's still loud outside. He considers that he doesn't need to step up and help, but leaving them to fight doesn't feel right when they are on his side. Before heading outside, he takes Grime's staff, contemplating that Grime wasn't a strong mage, but he carried this around despite the inconvenience. Therefore, it must have some benefits. Lennox acknowledges that he hasn't disregarded the idea of utilizing magical accessories or supportive items. He didn't have the money, as he already spent enough on vipers. He then steps out of the storage room with that staff in his hand and notices that the battle between the adversary's gangsters and Amnak's mercenaries is still on. He sees his comrades struggling to get the upper hand in that battle, so he raises the staff and harnesses lightning-bound magic to aid them. The lightning-bound maneuver conjures a radiant crystal ball, emitting bolts of light that strike the adversaries and catch them off guard. Amid the chaos, one of the adversaries notices Grimes' staff in Lennox's hand and discerns that their leader and mage have been defeated. He abruptly informs his comrades and urges them to run, prompting them to retreat without a second thought. Relieved to be alive and sensing an end to the confrontation, the mercenaries become super excited that the ordeal has concluded. Meanwhile, Lennox acknowledges that they must have fought hard. Even if he had been the one to fight off the leader and the mage, they were probably outnumbered. Suddenly, his attention is diverted to the redhead guy who seems barely conscious and exhausted. Lennox contemplates that he must have pushed himself to the brink of death, and he guesses that Guy wants him to see how hard he fought. Nonetheless, the protagonist finds it intriguing that the guy wouldn't have survived the battle with only the power to emit flames from his arms. Moreover, he was fighting at the front, risking like that, and surviving the fight to bathe in the joy of victory means that Guy deserved it. The protagonist discerns that the redhead guy was cornered into a dangerous situation. Therefore, he must have pushed his flame abilities past their limits. He steps towards him, considering that Guy did his job, so he doesn't need to threaten him more than he already has. He approaches that Guy and commends his efforts during that brawl. This unexpected commendation from Lennox relieves the red-headed individual, who visibly relaxes upon receiving recognition for his work. After that, the protagonist gazes at Grimes' staff, contemplating that it doesn't increase casting speed or mana rotation rate, and the force of the magic is identical too, so he deems it trash and hurls it down the ground. Observing the lack of practicality in holding onto an item that would inadvertently reveal his identity as a mage, the protagonist opts against selecting any equipment that might draw unwarranted attention to his magical abilities. Choosing discretion over potential exposure, he decides not to pick equipment that would expose him as a mage. The protagonist then commends the mercenaries' performance during the intense confrontation. In response, the mercenaries reciprocate the gratitude, acknowledging the protagonist's role and expressing their exhilaration at emerging victorious against a formidable gang. He then directs that the uninjured should take the injured people to the hospital, and those left with only minor injuries will stay with him to guard this place for the remaining time. Later, the protagonist sits alone in the warehouse and notices his trembling hands, wondering if it's because he isn't nervous anymore. Recognizing his exhaustion, he briefly considers using a viper for an energy boost. However, due to the scarcity of vipers in his possession, he dismisses the idea, opting to preserve them just in case. After that, another day went by without any problems, and there were no additional attacks from the gang. Everyone left excited for their pay as the protagonist contemplates now that they are gone, the storage is organized, and the situation report is done. All he needs to do is drop the sample off at the patent office. However, before leaving, he takes permission from AMNAC higher-ups to take some medicines along. Considering his success in the mission, the authorities permit him, stating that he can take as many as he wants. He takes melatonin and tonic medicines for exhaustion and some vitamin supplements and takes them along for his personal use. As he steps outside to depart, he notices the staff he abandoned earlier. He grasps it and decides to take it along, contemplating that if he gives it to Jenny, he can buy 1 or 2 vipers. He slings the staff over his shoulder and embarks on the journey to the patent office. Despite a persistent headache, he remains focused on completing his task, recognizing that his job isn't finished until he submits the sample. He grumbles internally about disliking errands, finding them somewhat tedious. Reflecting on his limited travels, he acknowledges that he has never ventured beyond District 10 and soon arrives at his location, the patent office. As he strolls around the building, he observes the serene and well-maintained surroundings, attributing the quietness to the fact that it's located in a district where the leaders of Valkan reside. The administrative agency of the city government lives in the one-digit districts, and according to Lennox, this area is frequented by public service employees and the city government's administrative management employees. He then remarks that the patent office looks like a temple out of a myth and decides to get this over with. Before he can head inside the office, an older man calls him out, pondering what brings a young man like him out here so early in the morning. Lennox responds that this is a patent office, countering what the man thinks he would be doing. The man replies that he must have developed some new technology and finds it impressive. Meanwhile, the protagonist contemplates if that man is exercising in a place like this, he isn't an ordinary older man. He wonders if getting involved with people in power is too early, so he decides to escape this situation without leaving an impression. Lennox realizes that the man isn't looking at him. Instead, he is looking at the staff. He smirks, approaches the man, and asks if he enjoyed the show he gave yesterday. While the man wonders what he means, with a gentle grin, Lennox informs that he has shot off some fireworks for the people afar to watch. He then asks the man if he is waiting for him because he enjoyed it. Lennox then lifts the staff and firmly places it on the ground, causing a slight pothole due to the impact, and tells the man he will give it back to him. He adds that Grime must have been a valuable mage to him and apologizes for the earlier events, and the man anxiously wonders whether he knew. Reflecting on the situation, Lennox contemplates how he could not, because that man recognized Grime's staff and already anticipated his arrival. Moreover, considering the man's freedom of movement in the area, Lennox concludes that he must be a district representative. He never would have expected the district representative to show up instead of hiring someone else. The man acknowledged that Grime was unskilled, but he was a nice person and informed Lennox that the moment he decided to go into politics, Grime put much effort into supporting him as best as possible. The district representative inquires if Lennox knows the purpose behind his visit after Grime's death, prompting Lennox to remark if he desires revenge. Meanwhile, Lennox thinks that he said that, but it doesn't seem to be the correct answer because that person's eyes don't seem to hold any hatred, disappointment, or rage. Instead, he sees intense greed. The district representative extends an offer to the protagonist, proposing that it would be a loss for the entire city if someone as skilled as Lennox were to operate independently as a freelancer. Expressing certainty in Lennox's talent, the representative recalls the sight of lightning in a cloudless sky. Hence, he proposes that he continue to climb up the social ladder and assures that he will be facilitated to become one of the tall skyscrapers. The protagonist takes a deep sigh, considering that the man's every sentence reveals his self-serving ambition, and realizes that this person is unusual because he lays claim to money that isn't rightfully his, seeks fame and authority he hasn't yet earned, and desires the talents of an employee who isn't under his jurisdiction. The protagonist, assessing the district representative's extreme greed, concludes that few match his level of avarice. Firm in his stance, he believes he doesn't require a figurative leash around his neck and rejects the offer outright. He acknowledges the man's desire to have him on board, but asserts that he has no compelling reason to align himself with the district representative, which takes the man aback. Deep down, Lennox contemplates that if he needs the support of someone in power, there are many more influential people than this district representative. However, turning someone as ambitious as him into an enemy would be a pain, so Lennox recognizes the necessity of managing the situation, even if he doesn't want to collaborate with the representative. He then tells the man that if he helped him, he could repay that debt one day, prompting him to wonder what he means. In response, the protagonist clarifies that they are not close, but there's no reason for them to be enemies. Later, he informs Jenny about that district representative. In response, she bangs on the table, stating that she heard about many weird and obsessive people in politics, but considers him worse than she imagined. When Lennox asks if she believes the man might attempt something, Jenny dismisses the concern, asserting that despite the man's oddity, his handling of the situation appears clean and professional. Jenny speculates that if the representative does intend to approach Lennox in the future, it would likely be after the man has achieved a higher position, if he's genuinely interested in collaborating. Lennox mentions the representative's apparent desperation for a mage, and Jenny notes that having connections with influential individuals like him could offer various benefits if handled adeptly. She implies that dealing with such links well could provide numerous conveniences. The protagonist reflects on Jenny's experiences and presumes that her life hasn't been ordinary, considering her establishment of a human resources agency and her work as a broker at a young age. Suddenly, Jenny's phone beeps, and she excitedly informs Lennox that Amnak has confirmed the sample's registration and sent the money. She offers to transfer the funds to his account, to which Lennox agrees and informs her that he needs to leave for somewhere. As he prepares to depart, Jenny halts him and confirms he doesn't have any other sources of income besides this right. When Lennox remains silent, she stresses establishing a credible income source to evade scrutiny. She asserts that pretense is essential because tax investigators go after jobless people with much money entering their accounts. When Lennox remarks that he will look into it, Jenny clarifies that she isn't rushing him, but he should at least look into other jobs. As he steps out of the bar, he feels fatigued and yearns to return home for some much-needed rest, but he realizes that he needs vipers to forget his exhaustion and function like an ordinary person. He hails a taxi and arrives at Plummer's Botanical Garden to acquire the vipers. The viper expert refers to him as a precious customer, apologizes that he didn't recognize an important customer like Van, and commends him for being a very talented mage. Lennox, maintaining his guise as Van, asks if the viper expert dislikes him, to which the man dismisses his assertion, stating that he was just surprised. He adds that if even he has heard the rumors, that means Van has successfully adjusted to this field. He couldn't picture it in his head. The viper expert adds that he didn't think a fool like the protagonist, who doesn't even know what he is smoking, would still be alive. Lennox wonders if that is what the man was thinking to himself while smiling on the outside, and now he guesses it's better to find out. He then places the money on the table and tells the man that he wants 100 of what he got last time. A bright smile spreads over Viper Expert's face to see that much money, and he admits that he didn't recognize Van as a young man with such a bright future. He then starts searching for the product, asserting that if Van is so rich, he should have told him earlier, and tells him that there's something he would like to recommend to him. As he steps out of the botanical garden, he is overcome by exhaustion, barely keeping himself steady, and starts sweating profusely. Seated on the ground, he resorts to using his viper and experiences a surge of vitality, making him feel truly alive. He acknowledges that he shouldn't rely on this solution, yet feels compelled as if there's no other choice. Reflecting on his situation, he sees himself traversing a constant tightrope to survive in this harsh and unforgiving city. He had thought he was managing adequately until now, but now he wonders if he will be okay in the future. For a week after that, he rested long enough that could be considered too much. He stretched enough so that he wouldn't become inflexible and ate meals he made himself. He counted how many hours of sleep he was getting to bring his biorhythm back to normal. He acknowledges that the character Lennox's body is uselessly sensitive and as fragile as glass, and he is tired of it, but he thinks he has somehow adjusted to this weak body. Despite this, he gets up, considering he has to use this much effort to pick a part-time job. He contemplates that he can't do something as consistent as working 3 days a week, and that he can't do night shifts. Upon reviewing his abilities, he concludes that he needs more time to find suitable employment, especially since physical labor is beyond his capabilities. Amid this, he receives a message from Jenny asking about his plan to take another quest. He contemplates that he has some things to research and decides to rest a bit more. Later, he arrives at the Balkan City Library in his true appearance, considering that he only goes to a few places while resting. However, he came here today with a clear purpose. Scanning the shelves, he searches for books related to summoning magic, spirit arts, and homunculus, and wonders if he should explore necromancy. He hardly lifts the related books and places them on the table to analyze their mechanics. He wondered a few things while fighting the werewolf and mage Grimes simultaneously. Their tactic was simple. The werewolf opposed in the front. Meanwhile, the mage supported him from behind with magic. He considers that possible methods to approach the battle against them are to either be much more skilled than them and crush them in a face-to-face fight, or use the same tactic as theirs to win the war slowly. He reflects that he could also kill the mage first. That way, he would get rid of the support, and if he can learn summoning magic or spirit arts magic and have some support, the fights will be much more stable. However, he also wonders whether finding a teammate for help might be a quicker solution compared to dedicating time solely to studying these subjects. Yet, he realizes the importance of assessing his capabilities before deciding. He delves into the study of summoning magic and observes that it involves numerous intricate conditions, resembling a complex process akin to a gacha system rather than a straightforward skill. Reflecting on its complexity, he compares it to his experiences in the world, finding the process of specifying and executing summoning overly convoluted. Additionally, he notes that the high cost of about 200 million cell for a summoning ritual could result in an unfavorable outcome, leading to wasted time and money. Disappointed by the complexities and uncertainties in summoning, he closes the book, contemplating another potential avenue: spirit art. He considers that if using summoning magic is like playing a gacha that depends entirely on luck, spirit arts can't even be called magic. It doesn't use mana, and its principles are closer to shamanism or necromancy. Delving into that book, he remarks that nothing looks helpful and considers this might work if he could naturally learn one while researching common magic. However, he deems it risky to invest significant time in learning this new skill, yet he recognizes its potential significantly if he could briefly distract enemies. Suddenly, Eris Richelin, the Labatnan University's elemental magic faculty chair professor, approaches him and asks if he has been rotting here all month long. She gently reminds him that she had asked him to meet with her, expressing her concern that he hasn't shown up despite her request. She questions whether his situation would improve just by burying himself in books. Holding each of the books he was engrossed in, she sighed deeply, perhaps feeling disappointment and worry. Meanwhile, looking at her serious face, Lennox wonders if she is imagining scenarios and making wrong assumptions about him. Eris adds that she knows he isn't talented in magic, but turning to this stuff isn't a good idea, especially summoning magic and spirit arts, and asserts that stuff depends on luck. When Lennox responds that he is aware, Eris anxiously wonders why he would continue reading about these topics if he's aware of their reliance on luck. Expressing concern, she humorously suggests that if Lennox is inclined to test his luck, buying a lottery ticket would be better than pursuing these magical arts. She discloses her position at the university, stressing that she has encountered only 3 spirit mages, implying that it's a futile aspiration. Lennox concedes that her perspective isn't entirely off base. If she had been an average person, her advice would have been correct. He contemplates that he wouldn't have to listen to her lectures if he told her about himself. She sits next to him, stating that she will give him a simple explanation to help him understand, and assumes that he will give up once he explains how difficult and luck-dependent summoning magic is. When she explains that magic is based on his ideologies and a concentration of his mana, Lennox's attention wanes. He contemplates that he already knows Eris is a professor, but her tone is very calm and familiar, and he acknowledges that she is a good person. A profound sense of gratitude washes over him as he recognizes Eris's respectful approach upon realizing his fervor for the subject, prompting him to contemplate the solace in conversing with someone amidst this desolate environment. He finds immense comfort and reassurance in having someone willing to engage with him in this solitary place. Amid this, Eris suspiciously asks if he is listening, to which he assures that he is listening very closely. She then asks about his name, asserting that if someone gives him a free lecture, he should at least introduce himself to them. The protagonist contemplates that she is one of the few who know his real face and realizes he must be careful about telling her name. In response, he politely questions the need to share personal details and stresses that he's merely a student engrossed in magical research in this library. He emphasizes that exchanging knowledge and having discussions solely based on their shared interest in magic is adequate. Understanding his stance, Eris assumes he's willing to learn magic from her and suggests meeting every other week, assuring that she will tutor him, leaving Lennox somewhat bewildered by her unexpected proposal. She asserts her intention to initiate instruction from the foundational levels rather than plunging straight into the complexities of summoning magic, so he must be prepared. Lennox explains that he's short on time, but she disregards his concern, casually stating she'll catch up with him later. As she departs, the protagonist muses over her apparent disregard for his preferences, observing her tendency to follow her own inclinations without much heed to others. He ponders her peculiarity, acknowledging her inherent kindness despite her unorthodox approach. Exiting the library, Lennox reflects on Eris Richelin's inclination toward individuals lacking innate talent yet brimming with an intense passion for magic. Recollecting their initial meeting, he acknowledges his lack of knowledge about her background, recognizing that engaging with her might pose a different challenge altogether. He considers that listening to her twice a week shouldn't be bad because being on good terms with a professor at a university would help him get a good job. Lennox inhales the Viper, contemplating that with that kind of benefit, it might be worth it to start having regularly scheduled meetings with someone since he has no one to depend on in this city. However, having to put so much thought into just meeting someone makes him a little sad. Later, arriving at the bar in his van persona, Lennox encounters Jenny, who informs him that his name will be registered in the deep web. This announcement leaves him wondering about the implications. Jenny clarifies that specific tedious processes have become remarkably efficient due to his exceptional job performance.